Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. It is Friday morning, January 30th. It's about 11:37 a.m. Eastern Time, and we are about to get started with our next installment of After the Pit, connecting people and technology. We're going to be going over episode 3 today. Hello to my good friend Keely. What up?
Hello, good morning from Florida. I am still here. It's not that warm here, which is a little disappointing. But yeah,
Hmm.
so I'm still down here after our wonderful company offsite with Rapid SOS. So
Oh, very nice, very nice. I was invited to that as well. I wish I could have been there. However, for those who are watching and listening, a lot of you know that I was diagnosed about a year or so ago with diverticulitis, and I had a flare up. Had kind of a scary moment. I went in for the flare ups are usually not too scary. I mean, it's painful, but there's sometimes it just goes away by itself. This time it did not.
we needed a
And
little extra help.
yes, yes, I was going in on, just 2 days ago for a, just regular checkup in order to get my medication and everything because I had already, called them to do a refill, and they're like, "You gotta come in." I'm like, "I'm out of town." And they said, "Well, we'll give you enough until, you can come in." Which I didn't get enough because I was out like 4 days without my high blood pressure, medication. Luckily, though, when I went out on Wednesday, 2 days ago to get, my checkup and everything, my blood pressure was immaculate. So that's good. That's a
That's
very good
good.
thing. But then the doctor starts feeling around my stomach and I had some pain and she's like, you know what? We need to have a CT scan like now. So then I got kind of scared and I was texting with you and I was like, dude, I'm not going to be able to be there. They just ordered a CT scan and I'm a little afraid of what's going on because like a lot of folks, I have a hernia. So and I've had it for years and the doctors are like, you'll be all right.
You'll
Like,
be fine.
yeah, you don't
Don't
you
do
don't
anything
have to
stupid.
yeah, you don't have to get it fixed. But if it were to get bad, then sure. It's been about 10 years now that I've had it and I've never had any issues with it or anything. But then they were saying, we just want to check for that, or maybe even like your appendix or something. And I said, "Okay." So I go
Okay.
in, I have it all done, and for any of you who've never had a, contrast CT scan, they hook you up with an IV, and they put in some, like, iodine, which if any of you have ever had moonshine before, that hot, warm feeling.
That's a really great correlation, actually.
Yes,
I love
and
that.
the nurse who was helping me out, she goes, "Have you ever had this done?" And I said, "Oh, the moonshine stuff, the moonshine feeling?" And she goes, "Yes, you have. You've
Yes, you
had it
have.
done before."
You're aware. You
Yes,
are completely aware what this is like.
it takes 30 seconds, so they have you put your arms up, and she's like, "Okay, here we go," and puts it in, and you start feeling from your throat all the way down. It is
Yep.
super hot, and yeah, it's like 30 seconds, and then they start doing the scans and everything. Everything came out fine. It turned out that, it's the diverticulitis, and I just need to be on antibiotics, but the pain is not fun. The antibiotics are starting to work, but the pills suck.
Oh, so it's so interesting that you're bringing this up because we have so much to talk about today about health profiles. And
Yes.
I feel like this is something that maybe should be included in your health profile. Because if I get there as your EMT,
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, oh God, he's got appendicitis, or oh God, we've got to get him to the hospital for the OR. And meanwhile, it's just, you know, high blood pressure and and like
Diverticulitis. Yeah.
diverticulitis, right? So like these would be helpful things to know about you
Yes.
and for the ER to know about you when you get there. So I love I don't hold on. I don't love that you're saying
I know, I was like, "You love this?"
that's weird. I'm so sorry. That is not what I meant.
Uh, I and, laughing all of you who are watching and listening, you know that I love to laugh, but this is painful. I might not show it, but this is painful. Like, in my waist, the laughing, hurts, but I'd rather laugh than cry, so let's continue laughing.
Let's laugh. Let's laugh. And, when you have the tears, I'll know it's not personal.
Oh, yeah, here like, seriously, clearing off some, like, wetness right now.
That's because we were talking before this as we were
Oh,
prepping, and all he kept doing was every time he spoke, his voice would get a little higher when he was laughing, and I was like, "Are
yeah.
you okay?"
Yeah, I had my Michael Jackson going on there for a little bit, throwing out
For
my
sure.
hee-hees and tee-hees and oh, man. But yes, you are correct. Talking about this and being able to have, as we were saying, as I was saying just a moment ago, connecting people and technology. This is some of the stuff that I love that's available so that if someone had to come out for me, like you were saying in this scenario, the information would be there because it's available out there for people to be able to do and stuff. But this is all information that is how is it delivered?
Through Rapid SOS, through our software that will sit inside the 911 center. So if you go to your phones, all of your phones, no matter if you're a Android user or an Apple user, you can go into your medical profiles that are in there and you can fill this information out. And when you dial, and okay, Big Brother's not watching you, right? Like that's not happening. They already know where you are. So like, let's just stop. But that health profile information, and I know we talk about things like HIPAA and all the paperwork that you signed. In this situation, you're agreeing to only give that information when you've called 911. So it triggers that information to be delivered. We don't have access to it any other time. It's not like we can go back there and research you up later on. It's legitimately only in an emergency, only if your phone has, the like if you've got crash detection or you've got things on there, all of that information gets pushed in. So like imagine if we could know that like maybe you were in a car crash because it's not a trauma, it's now a medical, like a cardiac something that has happened or a seizure that has happened. That's going to make treatment for our responders that much different. And imagine, and as somebody comes from the medical field, there are things that we would have to look for in the field that we're like, hey, was this the result of like a single car crash, right? Was it the result of, ETOH or being drunk? Or was this a medical issue that happened before? And, single car crashes are always really suspicious, right? Because you're like, what did a deer jump out? Was it little baby bunny in the roadway? Was this a medical condition that caused this to happen first?
Mhm.
Or was this, other, compounding effects, drugs, alcohol, things like that? So it's like when you're out there in the field and you're doing all of these things, you're sort of like trying to put the pieces together. But imagine if dispatch already had the pieces and they pushed it through to your CAD or they gave you the information over the air that was like, hey, possible history of seizure disorder. And now we know what we're treating, right? We're going to
Mhm.
give different medication, or this is a diabetic, right? We know we have to do something first before we treat the traumatic injuries because there's something else going on. So, like, this just helps, like, make the treatment of the patients happen in the field as opposed to waiting to get to an ER, waiting for the hospital to potentially find it in blood work or find it on a scan, just like you, right? You were having, abdominal pain and blood pressure and all of these things. I mean, your blood pressure was actually this time, but
Yeah, yeah, this time.
the years of
It's
dispatch is going to change
regulated.
that. Right, right. It's regulated
Right?
because years of dispatch changes that for a lot of us.
Mhm.
But like things like that, right? Like if I had come there and I was like, oh God, his blood pressure is high, he's clammy, he's got some, stomach problems going on. Are we dealing with a AAA, which is an aortic aneurysm? Right? Like, am I dealing with something that extreme, or am I dealing with appendicitis? Am I dealing with? But then it's like, oh no, this guy's just got diverticulitis and blood pressure. Now, that doesn't negate the fact that you should treat your patients, treat your symptoms, right? Like, but there's something to be said about all of these things that can happen in the field first before we're doing that transition over to the ER. And going to episode 3 last week, which was super exciting, and I know we both watched it because that's our homework, right? Like, so we got to watch the show. And then,
Yeah.
can you guys believe this? Ricardo went and started watching episode 4 without me, and
You just put me on blast. What the
I'm
hell?
putting him on blast a little bit for that. I was like, wait, don't do that yet because we're going to get our wires crossed. We're only talking about one thing at a time and we don't want to spoil alert anybody. But we are going to spoiler alert, episode 3. That was
Yes.
last week's. We're going to do that. But like, going and tying it into, some of the things that I saw during that episode, and one of them was the MVA, which was motorcyclist versus vehicle, right? And or for those of you out there that call it MVC, right? Because sometimes we're getting away from the word accident because they say crashes can be avoided. There's always something that can be done to avoid the crash, right? But in this situation, no way of knowing what was going on with the motorcyclist, right? Like, you know, was it reckless driving? Did he blow a stop sign? Did he have a medical event? None of that is, we don't know that information. But what ends up happening with the other patient is super interesting because this was like an unknown medical that came in. And now we've got this, he's suddenly a quadriplegic, but they can't find anything. Like they don't
Yeah.
know what's happening with this guy, right? And so now now that we understand the chemistry of what happened in his body, potassium shifted, which there's a lot of medical terms that go on there, but essentially your cells, they've got potassium in them. When it shifts into high stress, it can cause all sorts of things. It causes your body to do all sorts of crazy nonsense. And in this situation, this guy had a pre-existing medical condition that he didn't even know he had until this high stress incident came out.
Mhm.
And it causes this scare with him and his wife, and like they had been fighting beforehand. And this is, go back to, you never know when something's going to happen, so treat every day as precious as possible, and
Yes.
and make sure that you're using kind words and never ending mad, which I know is hard to do, but you just never know. And in this circumstance, you know, even the wife ends up with a medical emergency on top of all of this because
Right.
they didn't triage her there. She probably signed AMA in the field, which is not anybody's fault. But now going forward, right, this guy now has this medical condition they've diagnosed in the ER. And now going forward, this means that that situation could happen again. He walks out of the ER and something traumatic happens. He gets into another accident or witnesses something. This could happen to this man going forward. So imagine me responding to a call and this guy is laid out on the floor and he's got no sense of movement, nothing. We don't know what's going on, but he's like opening his eyes and blinking, right? And we know that, your C spine is what controls all those the breathing functionality and all the good things that go on. And now he's laying there and I'm like, but what happened? And they're like, nothing happened. We don't know, blah, blah, blah. But imagine if I had some health profile information that was like, hey, have this condition.
Right.
This could be a problem, may see signs of this. Right. So now I'm doing a little less trauma coding this guy and a little more medically looking at this guy and trying to like connect the dots and how can I treat this patient in the field better before I get him to the emergency room. Because at the end of the day, that treatment starting sooner is what's going to save lives, right? So, like, if we can get this information into the field, get the emergency profile, information that's been delivered through Rapid SOS, right? Like, imagine what we could do with that and the lives we could save with that. And I know it's really scary, but like, teaching your citizens that this information could be helpful and detrimental to their life is a game changer in the field. So, I would behoove you if it's not filled out, Ricardo. And if you
Yes.
need a lesson in how to do that, I am happy to help you. But
Yeah,
that's it. It's also the public education piece, right? Like
for
we
sure.
we have to get in front of our citizens and be like, hey, this is helpful data that we need.
And I love the fact that we have this available. To think back to all those times that when we were in dispatch and it wasn't available, again, just how many more lives that could be saved by having that information right off the bat and being able to transfer it over so that they have it. Because I'm just, as you're talking, I'm playing the episode and that entire scene through my head. And it's just crazy how all of it is going on, and if you haven't watched the show or anything yet either, there are so many stories that are going on within one episode because of the way they do the episodes. It's the season is within a 15-hour shift, so there's 15 episodes. So it's an hour to each episode of that shift, and at the end, or going through it rather, I'm like, "What's going on with the wife now?" And,
Right.
so before we get to that part, because there was something that really struck me hard while watching that. And you kind of mentioned it already a little bit, but I'll save it here more towards the end. But what I want to do before we get to the next part of this is first off, CJ Parker there that's coming in from LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I appreciate the props. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to play this video that we have because, as people know, we were out there a few weeks back for the season two episode two premiere. Actually, it was a sneak peek for healthcare workers and for first responders that were there. This video that I'm about to show, this is just a little bit from the first responders that were there as guests of Rapid SOS and everything, and how they were um, just the reactions of the whole event and everything that was going on. So let me play that here really quick before we get to the next part, which has to do with a roulette of sorts. So, ooh, let me let me play this here really quick. Here we go. We just finished the screening for episode two of season two of The Pit. What was this like for you?
The Pit is so realistic. So I was so excited to see what they were going to come out with and what was going to happen in that hour. Coming from my experience, I know what we would do, so I want to know what they're going to do. It's 100% realistic, and if you really want to know what healthcare professionals have to go through every single day, I would highly suggest watching The Pit.
We are big advocates of Rapid SOS, and obviously we know that they're big advocates of us, and that makes me feel good. That it kind of highlights our professionals at our center and gives them the due that they deserve.
It was so great that they were able to provide us passes to this event. Our folks, our first responders, the ones who make this happen every day and bring our folks down and let them see firsthand how well they're respected.
It's definitely a must watch. Yeah, the Pit's one of our favorites ever since it came out. It's nice to have your city represented on a national level.
It was very neat to be able to watch the Pit with other like-minded people who understand what's going on. So definitely very, very awesome to be here.
So that was just one of the videos that is coming out, but it was really cool to be there with everyone and do those interviews with everyone, and they were so funny too. There's some parts that are not on there, but it was really cool to be there with them, especially with TJ and everything that he was saying, and just how grateful they were for Rapid SOS to give that recognition, and how much they care about the first responders that are within the field and those within the center, especially because they're the ones who are using and putting all of this life-saving technology rather to good use. So it was really cool to be able to do that. I just wanted to share that really quick. And jumping into the next part, because so here's the thing for those who are watching and listening. uh Keely and I had sent some text messages back and forth a few days ago, and she had some notes, like a couple things that she really wanted to touch on. And one of those that she sent was, I think it was like medication roulette. And I thought, what the hell is that? Like, what is she talking about? Then when I watched the episode, I thought, oh, this is exactly what she's talking about. And I thought, oh my God, like this is pretty crazy. So fill us in here.
So first I want to talk about Tani's last message there when she was talking about being in a room with people that all have that same connective thread and watching it together. It was so different than watching it at home by myself last week. Like I wanted to go back to Allegheny and watch it with everybody again because
Yes.
it's just a totally different feel and a vibe. But that was very much like you felt like this kindred spirit. And I definitely, getting into this next section, I wished there had been somebody with me to be like, oh dude, I've definitely had that happen, so like that's what I needed. I needed to have that person next to me that I'd be like, oh man, I've totally been in that situation. Because I sent it to Ricardo and he was like, I'm sorry, what? And it was like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I have to tell you about this. So in my career, so there's a part in the show where It looked like they had been clearly at a 4th of July party, and there ended up with 2 patients that were having reactions from some medications, but like nobody knew what the medication was. But the reason why they didn't know is because they literally just had a table full of medication and they were just picking pills out of the bunch and popping the pills and see what happens.
Yeah.
This is not the first time I've seen this actually on display on screen. There's another movie out there that they talk about this too, and they talk about it about medication roulette and trying to figure out like, and it's because people have things that the more narcotic end of the drugs is typically where you see these things where it's like um people bring all their narcotics to a party and everybody just takes whatever, and this is how you end up with fentanyl overdoses, your Xanax overdoses. It's an actual thing. So I used to work in Rutgers in like on campus, and so we saw a lot of this at the parties. So like this wasn't a foreign concept to me. I've definitely seen it in the field before, but that's typically where you see it. But here's where it gets a little strange. In this one scenario that I have where I have this call and we get to the house and this guy's blood pressure is, I think at the time when we got to him, it was like 60 over 40 and it was not stable. Like his heart, his rhythm was all over the board. And I was actually a paramedic student at the time when this call comes in. And they're these like 2 little, like just the cutest little old couple. You could tell they'd been together forever, you know, and she was so caring and standing next to him. And so, you know, first question, one of the first questions you ask is like, okay, do you take any medication? And she was like, oh, yes, dearie. And she brings me over to the table. And there's just, I'm a table, like a sea of pills and medications. And I start picking up bottles. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is before we had digital charting, where like I could start filling out the first words on my chart and it would find the medication for me. Oh no, this was like handwritten. And I like look at it first and I'm like, oh, this is going to be so much writing. And I start picking up bottles and I'm like, I'm noticing that it's like his name, her name, they're all mixed in together. And I'm like, uh, do you make sure before you pick up these pills that they're yours? And she looks at me and she goes, no, we just take whatever the doctors prescribe to us and we both take them. We just go through the pill pile and take the medication. And I'm standing there
Oh,
and
dude.
I'm in the other room, right? So my partners, so again, I was a student, so I was doing the, you know, the grunt work, if you will. So like I walk back into the room and I'm like, I think I found our problem. And so I have the one guy comes in the room. His name was Gary, great guy. And I was like, they just take all the pills. They don't. And she's like, well, the doctor gives it to us. So we figure we both should take it to give us protection. And there was that moment where you just see Gary like, oh Lord, but there were so many pills. There was no way for us to be able to determine what he may or may not have taken that day. And we're like, okay, do you take all of these pills every day? She's like, oh no, sweetie, we just take a few here and there. And it was like, you could tell that it was like, there was no ill will. There was no medical roulette going on or medication roulette, like not like the frat parties that I've seen. There was nothing like that going on. This was just literally like these 2 old people who just absolutely adored each other, that shared everything, shared their life, and now they've got this. I wish back in the day we didn't have like really great cameras. This would have been a great time for me to just take a picture of this table, because it was like, think of a dresser. That's what it was sitting on, and it was the full length, like a 6-drawer dresser. It was from end to end with just pills and bottles. Some of them were empty, some of them were expired, some of them, and I'm like, so how do you know which ones to take? And she was like, well, I don't know. We do our best. And I was like,
Oh,
oh,
dude.
So this goes back to health profile. And would have been really super helpful. And imagine if we could have like had that information kind of flow in from a doctor, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
even if we took this a step further, like what's the future look like, where like the doctors could be like, these people are still actively on these medications, right? And that would have been incredibly helpful, even if they filled it out themselves or they had a family member help to fill it out. But like, so this way we knew what was the active medication and we could rule that out as normal. And then like what shouldn't be in this pile and get rid of those. But this was like the most wild situation, because I had to literally go find a bag and like basically with like one arm, like scoop them all into a bag and take everything with us to the hospital, and then had to get to the hospital with like these bag. I had two bags because like there was so much medication they couldn't fit in two garbage, like two shopping bags, the plastic shopping bags. Back when New Jersey was allowed to have plastic shopping bags. Um, but like, so I bring them into the hospital. And I remember the nurse just like looking at me, and there's like, there's scenes that you'll see in the Pit where like the look on the hospital staff's face as they're like being passed the patient from EMS. And it's like, those are real interactions where we're like, yeah, sorry. And like the sarcasm that goes between us because like we're giving report, but like there's a tone because we're like, medical roulette, not sure. Here you go. Good luck. It's like, so now
Jeez.
they have to look because like, the thing about blood draws, right, is that they're calling for certain things because they're going to hit the obvious, and then they get deeper and deeper as they can't find things. So it's like now I'm like, here's all these medications, you have to figure out which one's screwing up this guy's blood pressure because I'm not sure. And he really wasn't stable at all. Like he had a irregular heart rhythm. His blood pressure was bottoming out. He was diaphragmatic, clammy, sweaty. He was all the things that like are reading this guy is circling the drain. And it was like, how do we get him out of that? And this poor woman, I don't know that she would have survived without him. So we're doing our best to like, find out what's wrong, but we had nothing to go on in the field. We had no real medical history. We had no real medication list. We didn't know, like, we could find the pills with his name on it and start putting together the pieces of like what type of medical condition he could have by what medication he's taking or supposed to be taking, because she was also taking his meds too. But there's also things that you can't take together because it's going to cause a problem, as we were seeing. But if we had had some type of health profile data that was delivered through Rapid SOS where we could take a look at it and be like, okay, so this is his medical condition and he probably took this, which counteracted that. It would just help us in that moment to treat him better in the field so that we're not turning this poor victim over to the hospital, this poor patient, right? And being like, I don't know, you figure it out. Instead, we'd be able to be like, this is what's happening. Here
Yes.
we go. Right? It would just imagine the minutes saved, the hours saved, because now you're not waiting
Right.
for a lot of lab work, right? Like it would just be a lot easier. I think in that situation, we probably still would have needed a whole ton of lab work to figure out what exactly it was, but it could have been helpful to understand what he has to treat that and then counteract whatever else could be happening with the medication.
Yeah. And so the family, for those again, spoiler alert, it's like a racing family, and they are like, they're talking about all of these things that they do, all of these things that they take, and they actually have someone go to their house, and they do kind of like they do a video call over their phones, and they're showing one of the doctors everything that's on there, and there's a huge just pile of pills on a table, a dinner table, and they're going through them, and they're like, okay, this is what it is. And yeah, it ended up being a high blood pressure medication that the guy took, but they asked how many he took, and he goes, oh, probably about 4 or 5. And they're like, okay, that's probably what it was, that's why. And yeah, they luckily they end up telling him, we'll just have to be here for a few hours, fluids and all this other stuff, and he'll be good to go. And the family's like, yay. And I'm like,
we'll be back for the race.
yeah, they're like, you'll be back in time for any
For
4th of July
fireworks.
festivities or anything. Yeah, you'll be fine. And I'm like, all right. Like that's the best, that's the best outcome, right?
Right.
But also at the same time, don't be taking other people's pills that are not
Please,
yours.
please don't do that.
Right.
Please don't do that.
Yes.
There,
Yeah.
there was another patient. It was in the episode before that,
Mhm.
where they had, college students. They went out to get some medicine. They weren't sleeping through finals, like totally something again I had seen all the time. And they end up with 2 patients who overdose on fentanyl, right? Because whatever they picked up had been laced with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And again, these are things we saw, like in my EMS career, there was a time where that was happening a lot more often than it wasn't, and that's not okay. But again, it's because these kids are getting medication from other people. They're, they don't know where it's coming from. They're just taking what they have because they're just trying to get ahead. And it's like, these were accidental. They thought what they were taking was a safe something. And it's like, if you don't know, if it does not have your name to attach to it, if it did not come from a pharmacy or a doctor, these are things you should not be taking. And then in that situation, you saw that one of them made it through because they were able to get aid because her friend acted quickly. The other one, he does not pull through, right? And it's like, that's the difference, is that everybody's physiology is made up differently, so you're going to react to things differently. You also don't know how much of what is going to be that pushing you over the edge. And again, this comes back to sticking within your lane, taking what only is supposed to be yours, and also filling out the health data so that we know when we get there, like,
Right.
you
What is
are
going
supposed to
on?
be taking and what you're not supposed to be taking, right? And also what kind of conditions you might have. It's certainly a game changer for sure.
Yeah. Just it's such an easy thing and it's there, so take advantage of it.
Yes,
And
please do
it'll
that.
help everyone out like you wouldn't believe. Um as we go into the wrap up of this after the pit episode, which this has been a lot of fun, and it's always awesome hanging out with you and talking and chatting and also learning a lot more stuff because we come from public safety, we're first responders, but you also come from a spot that I've never done before, so I could just listen to you talk, man. Like you've got stories for days, and
As
I
stories today,
love
I'll get on my soapbox any day for any of you out there, and I will help you if you need help and
there
you
you
can't
go.
figure out how to educate your public with health profiles. Let me know. Hit me
Yes.
up. We can get that information to you and your team to educate them in the community.
So one of the things I wanted to mention as we go out on this is you kind of mentioned it in the beginning as well, where we are talking about this pedestrian or car motorcycle accident, like all of this stuff that was going on. That first, the person who got hit, who was not in the car, ends up passing away in the episode, and it's immediate almost when they're checking the person out that the person has passed. Then they move on to the driver of the car, and the wife is there and stuff. And throughout the episode, you find out that, as you had mentioned as well, they were arguing, they were fighting over some things. Well, you find out too that what was going on for the fight and everything was that she was trying to get him to, because he's been working a lot and doing a lot of different things, and she had planned a trip for them, and he was arguing it and trying to shut it down. Like he refused, and he says this, but he says this when he's recording a video when he is recovering, because as we mentioned, he was pretty much paralyzed, but as things were getting regulated and stuff, he was able to talk a little bit better. His wife comes over to tell him he's going to be okay. But before that, she mentions to one of the doctors, please don't let him die. We were arguing, and I don't want that to be the last thing that he remembers if he doesn't make it. And so when she tells him, when she finds out that he's going to be okay, she ends up going to tell him that as well. And then she passes out. And they look at her body, and it turns out that she's been having internal bleeding the whole time. Now, like you said, she probably did sign that AMA and everything, right? But they also are saying we should have just pressed her to just check it out. So they're already kind of taking that in as like, you know, we should have done this. So now she's recovering and everything. While he is there before he ends up recording this video for his wife, he says something that really stuck with me. And he says something to the effect of, so this is it, huh? And the doctor says, what is? And he goes, you feel that some things are just so important. And then you end up in a place like this. And the doctor's just like, yeah. The reason I say that is because that really puts life into perspective. That you
Yeah.
care about so many things. So many things are so damn important. And then you realize how not important it is because you have your loved ones there. So going into the wrap up of this, just be there for each other. Because, like you were saying, Keely, you never know.
You never know. You never know what happens when you walk out that door. So always say, I love you, and always end with kind words. As somebody who has been in, this line of work for a long time, I've seen lives change in a minute. I actually have a tattoo, and the words are memento mori, and that means in Latin, it's the full sentence, carpe diem. You've all heard that one, but it's carpe diem memento mori. That means remember you are mortal. So remember that, things can change, and the best we can do is be there for each other and choose kindness. Choose magic.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's anything that you've been waiting to do, because we've been talking about how life is short, the time is now. So do what you do. And I hope you guys have an excellent weekend. Keely, I hope that you're able to get some rest, my friend.
I'm a little tired, guys.
Yes.
Little tired.
And we love you guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next week, and we will talk to you all soon. Check you later. Oh, and one last thing. If you haven't done so already with these recaps that we're doing, season 2 is streaming now, and it is on HBO Max. This is a Max original, The Pitt. So make sure to check that out. Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Check you guys later. We'll talk to you soon.